Welcome, everyone. My name is Jenny Hess, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, Maryland, a 105-year-old nonpartisan organization whose mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. As part of that mission, we sponsor webinars to inform the public on important issues. Support for our programs and voter services comes from viewers like you. We welcome your donations so that we can continue to provide high-quality trending topics webinars and other civic educational events to the public and members at no charge. Montgomery County's shortage of affordable housing is affecting the county's ability to attract and retain employers and employees. Speakers will address current affordable housing projects and proposals, what can be done to attract both businesses and housing developers, and projections for the future of affordable housing and economic development in the county. Before I introduce our speakers, I have a few reminders. This session is presented for educational purposes only. The views expressed are those of the speakers. No endorsement or support by the League of Women Voters should be assumed for any individual or view. The webinar is being recorded. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel at a later date. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media. We have put links in the chat box for you. The audience will be muted during the webinar, and the chat box has been disabled to minimize distractions. After our speakers make their presentations, we will have a Q&A session. To submit a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question into the box, and then hit send or return. We will answer as many questions as time allows. The program is scheduled to end at 8:30. We have three presenters tonight. Our first is the Honorable Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, President of the Montgomery County Council. She will discuss the efficacy and extent of existing measures to address affordable housing, what is still needed, and how developers are responding to workforce housing now and other zoning text amendments of the past 12 months. Our second speaker is Dan Reed, Maryland Policy Director of Greater Washington. They will discuss current activities and proposals to address the affordable housing shortage, what other services or programs exist to support the housing needs of low-income individuals and families, and how residents qualify and apply for affordable housing. Our final speaker tonight is Tony Byrne, founder of The Real Story. With the county's future fiscal health in mind, he will address how the affordable housing shortage affects the county's ability to attract new employers and employees, and what Montgomery County needs to do to attract both businesses and housing developers. All right, now I'd like to invite Council President Fanny Gonzalez to present.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. Again, my name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, and I'm the Montgomery County Council President. I was honored to have this position only 2 weeks ago. It feels like ages at this point with everything going on. I also chair the Economic Development Committee for the County Council, and I am a member of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. So anything that deals with housing and economic development, that's Natalie. So you have the very best right here. So do you just want to do intro right now, or do you want me to proceed? Intros, should I wait and hold?
You can go ahead and proceed.
Okay. Okay, so when we talk about the housing crisis that we're facing, not just in Montgomery County, but regionally and nationally, you can talk about it in so many different ways. You can say, and so by the way, my background is also on redevelopment. I was a member of the planning board before I joined the county council. So spent 7 years in the Montgomery County Planning Board, which is part of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. It's the agency that oversees development in the county and also supports the park system in the county. So just for background. So I'm going to answer the question based on what I have done as a council member since I joined the county council 3 years ago. So in the last 3 years, the first thing I did when I joined was to work on rent stabilization, right? Because when we talk about housing and we talk about working families, we must talk about rent increases and how people in our county should be able to stay in the places that they live and not being priced out. So I am very proud to have worked on rent stabilization. Some people love it, some people hate it. I personally love it. Was it perfect? No, but every single bill that you work on, especially controversial bills, are gonna take a lot of compromise to make that happen. So that was my first bill, and it basically says that we're putting a cap to 6%, so rent increases cannot go beyond 6%. And this doesn't include municipalities like Gettysburg and Rockville. So I want to put that. And also, it's only for buildings that are 23 years old. Okay. So anything that was built 23 years ago is exempt. So as time passes, those buildings get added. Okay. So that's one thing that I wanted to highlight here. So that was my first bill dealing with rents. The second thing that I did, and this was my second year, was working on housing production, because another thing that you must do is creating more housing for more people for every single income level. Okay, it's about creating opportunities. So I worked on a packet alongside my colleague Andrew Friedson on called Housing Now packet, and included basically three components. One of them was the ensuring that certain places in the county, and we had a criteria, you could upzone and build duplexes and triplexes and small apartments instead of the standard single family home. Okay, so when I was, and this is not a campaign talking point, I'm just giving you the background of why I worked on this. But when I was campaigning and I was door knocking, the number one issue that people told me as I was meeting folks was housing affordability, and the worry that people had that their 20, 30-year-old kid couldn't afford to live in Montgomery County. So some folks kept telling me, wouldn't it be great if I'm allowed to build a townhouse next to my home for my child to live in? I'm not talking about an ADU, which is already allowed in the county, but another house or even a triplex. So I took those ideas into action. The planning board also worked on a series of ideas on how to create more production of housing. Again, housing of for every single income level and every type, including duplexes and triplexes. So long story short, we came up with this plan that already passed the county council, that if your house is in a location that has at least 3 lanes for vehicles to drive, so we're talking about wide roads, the front of your door of your home is on that road, you could not just have a McMansion if you want to redevelop your property, but you could be allowed to have a duplex or triplex if you so want to. And another requirement is that that property has to go through the planning board. Okay, it cannot be just done by right. If you do a McMansion anywhere in the county, you do it by right, which means you go to DPS and you get a permit and you follow development standards. So we did this in a way to really take care of a lot of the feedback that we were receiving, people who didn't want folks to do this by right. I disagree, but anyway, again, all about compromises. So that's part of the law now. The other portion of the Housing Now packet was the conversion of half empty office buildings into housing. So again, I chair the Economic Development Committee. So in my committee, we spent over a year analyzing and looking for ideas of what to do with those at least half empty office buildings in the county. How can we incentivize the property owner to do something with them? Because nobody wants to see vacant buildings in their neighborhood, right? If you have a vacant building, that attracts crime, doesn't attract anybody that wants to invest in that community. So we did two things with this. Number one, we make sure that we make the process for conversion from office to housing faster on the regulatory angle. And the second part was the tax abatement to motivate property owners to actually do this. This is nothing new. This is something that Virginia, DC, many places across the nation were already doing. We have a tax abatement on WMATA properties to redevelop on top of them. So, but this one will be for half empty buildings, and it also has an affordability requirement. As a requirement, 17% of the building has to be affordable, which is great. So putting in practice the idea and the values that we have as a county that yes, we want to have more supply, more housing supply, but we also want to make sure that it meets certain income levels for low income communities. So again, I just covered quite a few things, and I hope people are not confused. But these are things that I have been working on for the past 3 years, and I'm proud of them. Let's see what happens next year. I already have some ideas, but I'm not gonna say them here. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Council President Fanny Gonzalez. If I could just add one question to you, could you give us a basic understanding of the definition of affordable housing?
So basically, there are two things. One, I would say to make it like very simple, because there's a very technical answer to that. For the workforce housing that I didn't even address here, but it's part of the housing now. Basically, a family making less than $150,000, a family of four making less than $150,000, that will be workforce housing. So imagine a teacher making $80,000 a year and the spouse making, I don't know, 70. That will be under the workforce housing approach here. And it's still, we do work on deeply affordable housing, and we have quite a few projects in my district. And when I say deeply affordable, I'm talking about people making around $40,000, $50,000 a year. Okay. And I have right now three projects going on in my district. Two of them already completed that are deeply affordable. The other one is being built as we speak, and that's the Wheaton Arts and Culture Center. That's gonna have about 200 units of deeply affordable housing with it, which is great. So it's affordable housing, workforce housing, deeply affordable housing. So in the end of the day, it's so confusing, but what we want is the real message is to say we need housing for people of every income level, because at the end of the day, that helps everybody. So
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that for us. Now I would like to invite Dan Reed to speak.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan, they, them pronouns. I'm the Maryland Policy Director for Greater Washington. And first off, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having me this evening, and to Council President Natalie Fanny Gonzalez for her leadership on this issue. I brought some slides, super stoked to share them. I will admit they are, I think, slightly different topic than deeply affordable housing, but it'll make sense when we get there. So I'm gonna get this screen ready for you. All right, make it big. All right, can you all see? Awesome, cool. So we are an organization that's been around for almost 20 years. We started out as a blog run by volunteers. Today, we are a blog run by a professional staff that also does advocacy work, primarily in DC and Maryland, a little bit in Virginia. And we work on housing, land use, and transportation issues, namely how to make these systems more sustainable and equitable and work better for everyone. And I grew up in Montgomery County. I live in the county now. And one thing I am hearing about a lot in the news and from my friends and colleagues and so forth are just concerns about the budget, right? We are facing a very significant budget crisis in the county right now. And that has sort of real consequences as we go forward. There are conversations about higher taxes coming next year, and there are also conversations about cutting services. 10 libraries, including the one closest to my house at Long Branch, won't be open on Sundays starting in January. My neighborhood of East Silver Spring is very anxious about the potential to close Silver Spring International Middle School due to the costs of maintaining this almost 90-year-old building. And one of the key reasons why we are facing this challenge in Montgomery County and at the state level too, let me be clear, we're not totally alone in this, is because we are losing middle class residents. The council president pointed out that we have a need for housing at all income levels, but I am increasingly concerned about the middle, and I'll define what I mean by that. But the county has lost a significant number of middle-income households over the past 20 years, and at the state level, more people are leaving Maryland than are coming here from other states. And many of those people are younger folks. They're under 45. These are folks who are starting families, entering the workforce, wanting to put down roots somewhere. And many of them make between $100,000 and $200,000 a year. So this is the workforce, as the council president noted. These are families who could be putting down roots in Maryland and Montgomery County, and they're not. They're going to Florida, they're going to Pennsylvania. I would do a show of hands to see who has someone who's moved to North Carolina. I have. I imagine many of you have as well. Tony's raised his hand. This is a problem because those folks are starting their families there. They're starting their careers there. They're taking their tax dollars there. They're taking the other contributions they could make our community stronger to those places. Uh, and one reason why we're losing those folks is because we aren't building enough housing. The Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, which is a regional sort of planning organization, estimates that we need about 41,000 homes to be built in the county just in the next 5 years. We have some homes that have been approved but that haven't been built yet in what's sometimes referred to as the pipeline. But these are approvals that go back a very long time and may represent projects that stalled out for some reason or in locations that aren't totally desirable, or maybe even aren't products that people want anymore. And also, we're not approving that many homes right now. The county issued roughly 50 building permits for multifamily homes this year, which is a very small number in a county of 1 million people. And one consequence is home prices have gone up significantly since COVID, 25%. And the average single family detached home, standalone house in the county now costs $1 million. And this has consequences. We talked about folks leaving the county and leaving the state. It also means sprawl, as many of my friends and family members have been priced out to Frederick County and Howard County and Prince George's County, and they drive back into the county. And we're paying for those roads, right? For folks who may have jobs in the county and are taking their tax dollars somewhere else. So, what does middle class mean? Council president used one reference, about $150,000 a year, and that's kind of it, honestly. One term that housers like to use is between 80 and 120% of the area median income. That's for the whole DC area, or roughly between 106 and 160,000 for a family of four. To put that in a little context, the starting salary for a teacher in Montgomery County is about $70,000, which is similar for Montgomery County Police Department, similar for firefighters. And again, most of the people leaving the state right now are making between $100,000 and $200,000 a year. These are the folks who are really crucial to stick around. And I'll explain why it is so important to make it possible for these folks to be able to stay in or move to the county. It's because the housing that we need to serve both middle income and low income residents is the hardest to build, and particularly for middle income households, can be built without significant subsidies. That means generating more tax revenue to support our local economy. It is very easy to build single family homes for the families who can afford to build them. And I'll use 3 examples from my neighborhood of East Silver Spring. Some of you might have seen in the news, this building just opened last week. It's called Bracken Square. It's down the street from my house. This is a project that my civic association supported. It will bring 98 new homes for working families to my neighborhood. It is an income restricted building, so it is generally for families making, I believe, under $106,000 a year for a family of four. And it costs a lot of money to build. An average of $561,000 a unit. Now, this is affordable housing for folks who have limited incomes, and they can't pay $560,000 for an apartment. So there are significant federal tax subsidies that come from this, $24 million from the federal government and $9 million from the county, which is about almost $100,000 an apartment, to make this building work in a way that actually financially could be built and could pay all of the people involved to build this building, from the lenders down to the construction workers, while also getting the prices to a point that lower income families could afford. And part of that is also the county made a deal for the developer to pay reduced property taxes. So this building is a net positive for the community. It does come at a cost to taxpayers, and it took a very long time to get built. I went to one of the first meetings for this project in 2017. And we have been working our neighborhood association with the developer for about 5 years before this project opened. Literally one street over from Bracken Square is this house. It's one of many of the teardowns that have been built in my neighborhood where smaller, older homes have been replaced by much larger homes. This is a 4,800 square foot house. It has 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. It sold for $1.5 million, 3 times the cost of the older home it replaced. You would need an income of at least $250,000 a year to buy this house, which means well above the middle class. It pays a significant amount in property taxes, 18 grand, nothing, not too shabby, more than I pay, and was built with basically no zoning review. To build a house like this, you can pull a demolition permit to knock the little old house down, and you pull a building permit to build this guy. And of course, they have to inspect it for fire safety and for electricity and such, but it doesn't touch the planning department at all. Unlike that first project, which involved a rezoning and a tremendous amount of review and neighborhood pushback. And down the street again are these townhomes. This is part of a development called Art Space. This was also built a couple of years ago. These are 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes, and they come in 2 different flavors. The sort of market rate homes, as you might call them, sold for about $850,000. And there were 4 workforce homes. As Council President Fanny Gonzalez noted, the county can require developers to set aside a number of homes and new developments for lower income and working income families. And so they sold for about $370,000. This project included some big A affordable housing, but this portion of it didn't really require a subsidy to get built because these townhomes basically pencil out for the developer. Everyone can get the money they need to build these, and those costs help cover the cost of those workforce units. So public money wasn't involved for that, though the property was a police station, so it was public land. These 11 homes, even though their individual tax bills are lower than that big house, pay $90,000 a year in property taxes on roughly the same piece of land. And yet, this project took 9 years to build because of zoning issues, rezoning, neighborhood pushback, all sorts of complications. So, the reason why I'm so pressed about this is because townhomes in Montgomery County, a county where $1 million house is the average now, are how families can put down roots here and how seniors coming down from their big family house can age in place. And they're generally cheaper than comparable single family homes. These new townhomes, 850 is a lot of money. It's more than my house, but it's still 43% less than a new single family house down the street. And I want to encourage folks, because I've had many conversations with people over the years who point to homes like that and they say, well, 850 is a lot of money. This little, 1950s Rambler house in Wheaton costs $400,000. And they're correct. And that's why it's important to compare new townhomes to new single family homes, old single family homes to old townhomes, and homes within the same neighborhoods. Because you go all over the county and you'll see the same relationship that townhomes are generally cheaper than single family homes. But they're illegal to build under current zoning, as are apartments in most of the county, whereas that big single family house can be built pretty much most places. And there have been some meaningful initiatives to change that. The More Housing Now zoning package that passed earlier this year is a meaningful step in that direction to make it possible to build these kinds of homes in more places. But it's still really hard to build the homes that we need for lower income and for middle income families because of opposition from communities, which can draw out the process of getting something approved, and that drives up prices. There is, a perception that the people who turn out for meetings are the public, right? They took the time to come out and speak up. But, our organization, we did an analysis last fall of folks who were signed up to speak at a set of community meetings about zoning in the county. And you can see there's a pretty strong discrepancy between the demographics, just age-wise, of the people who came to these meetings and the county as a whole. These public meetings are very unrepresentative of the county. And you can imagine in a meeting dominated by a subset of older residents, the concerns of middle-class families and young families who want to put down roots in this community, who want to get started in this community, weren't being heard as much as they should be. So that's why one thing we do is polling. This is the last part of the presentation. We have done a number of polls of voters in Montgomery County and across the state. We're going to do another set of them next month, which I'm super stoked about. And we do these for a couple of reasons. We want to understand what normal people think about housing issues, the folks who will never contact their council member, who will never go to a community meeting, but who do vote. Um, they actually do care about policies to make it more affordable to build homes in the county, even if it means neighborhoods look different. They value lower housing costs over protecting neighborhood character, especially voters who identify as very liberal or somewhat liberal. I recognize this is a nonpartisan space, but I do want to we did want to show that distinction. Um, we also polled voters about attainable housing strategies, which is one of the many conversations we have been having about zoning changes in Montgomery County to make it possible to build middle-income housing. And we saw across many different subsets of voters, particularly Black voters and voters who rent, there was a majority in support of these changes. We did this polling in October of 24, so we also asked about presidential candidate Kamala Harris, who had a pro housing platform, and that increased her support as well among Democrats. So this is where, as we go into an election, what I am paying attention to, what our organization is going to be paying attention to, are the choices that we have before us. We can continue in the path that we're on, building homes for the few people who can sort of get their way through the zoning process. We can continue to lose middle income residents. We can continue to have a smaller tax base and face cuts to public services that we all need. Or we can continue the progress that we have made to make it easier to build homes for people of all incomes, to keep middle class and young families in the county, to keep working families in the county, grow our tax base, and provide and improve on the public services that we're all used to. That's my piece. This is what's been eating me. This is what I am focused on as an organization, or I should say, one of the things we're focused on. And I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate that information. And now I'd like to invite Tony Byrne to speak.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting me to participate here. I'm going to give a little bit of background context and then talk about my own experience as an employer, what other employers are experiencing, and then talk about the general kind of commercial environment as it all relates to housing and riff a little bit on what Dan mentioned around the county budget and some of the concerns that we should all have on that. So my wife and I have lived in Montgomery County for 30 years. For the past 25 years, I've been the owner and operator of a consulting firm in downtown Silver Spring. And it's really interesting if we look back and reflect on that quarter century plus, this is not a new issue, this issue of affordable housing. It has always been there. People have been debating this for a long time. It's only gotten worse over time. And as a county, one of the reasons why it's gotten worse is because we've pretty consistently kicked the can down the road. And what you consistently hear is it's not the right time. You know, you hear this across business cycles where it's up or down, housing cycles where it's up and down, pandemic, whatnot. People say now is not the right time. And there's a couple issues here. I think you have this legacy of single family detached home zoning, which is pervasive through the county and is really a legacy of Jim Crow. It was an attempt to do segregation by other means. But secondly, when we've tried to change this, we've allowed individual neighborhoods to veto measures that would build more types of housing across a greater swath of the county. And now I think the chickens are really coming home to roost. So, but having said that, I think we can be optimistic. They say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. Well, I think the second best time to address housing is definitely now. And I think we can be proud as individuals and taxpayers in Montgomery County of what some of the positive things that the county government has done around inclusive zoning, so-called MPDUs, and which are moderately priced moderately priced dwelling units, and other pretty innovative measures. But as Dan mentioned, $100,000 per family to spend on affordable housing is really an expensive way to give poor people dignity, honestly. And however much we have done, it has not been enough. And what this ought to tell us is that if we really want to address this problem of affordable housing, which is an issue as then and the council president mentioned, it's an issue across multiple, income tiers here. Then we're going to have to really free up the private sector as well to address this. And so let's talk about that. Um, I'm an employer and I recruit, try to recruit talented young people. Certainly for my business, there's a work from home component, but my preference would be that they were nearby so that we could meet up 2 or 3 days a week. I definitely have the office space for it. And what's interesting is when it could be oftentimes it's someone in their late 20s, early 30s. They're either forming a family or thinking about family formation. And they look at Montgomery County and are like, "Pff, I can't afford to live there." And I may end up hiring them and then they end up working from home and they don't, I lose out a little bit, but also I think the county, as previous speakers have mentioned, also kind of loses out. And the reality is I'm not even sure there is a $450,000 Rambler on offer anymore. I mean, there are almost no starter homes in Montgomery County, and we have to ask ourselves whether this is okay or not. Now, again, I'm still able to hire people. If it's a younger person, sometimes they're living at home, quite frankly, but more often than not, it's a work from home situation. But my preference would be to have them closer, and this has so that the dearth of opportunities for the types of people that could really add value to my business is really impacting my business. And so I'll talk a little bit about, friends who are also business owners. So we know some neighbors who run a home care business. It's a home companionship business. So they really, really, really struggle with employee retention, right? So this is the lower end of the way this business works is it is for sure the lower end of the wage tier that this business can support, because insurance doesn't pay for these services. So families are paying out of pocket. So, it's not a high-end luxury business. But the people who will do this work, for the most part, cannot afford to live in Montgomery County, or they are living in some of the more remote parts of Montgomery County where we have tended to, for lack of a better phrase, we have tended to warehouse poor people in Montgomery County by setting up policies that sort of consigns them to particular neighborhoods, which are the only neighborhoods that they can afford. And so what this does is it pushes an enormous commute burden on them. And I would commend you to the Atlantic Monthly, which had an article just out today about how long commute times in particular make it very difficult for female participation in the marketplace, particularly mothers. And there's more and more statistical evidence on this. It's basically we're trading the exclusivity of our neighborhoods in exchange for someone else to commute farther. And this is, in my personal opinion, a social tragedy, but it's also a significant business issue for business and commercial growth in this county. Um, so let's talk about then the kind of the general commercial environment. And I think there's one really big issue that, as I listen to people around the county, that comes up consistently, is that politically in this county, we have ostracized developers. And often people won't just say developers, they'll toss in quickly, they'll say, well, greedy developers, right? Developers are somehow they became bad people. And there's honestly too many politicians in this county that also say that. And this is interesting to me because we don't say the same thing about automobile builders. These are home builders. I'll share a personal anecdote that the houses in my neighborhood are about, for the most part, about 90-ish years old. They were all built by a profit-seeking developer. I can imagine some of the dairy farms nearby were not happy to see these homes built, and by the way, they were marketed as luxury homes, even though the typical footprint is only about 1,200 to 1,600 square feet. I'm really grateful that that profit-seeking developer built that home. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a place to live. So when people say, oh, we have to keep developers out of this, basically what you're saying, unless you built your house yourself, basically what you're saying is, I'm okay with living in the fruits of some commercial developer back in the day who built my house, but I'm not okay with other people, with other generations enjoying the same fruits of that. And this is really something that I wish, as a community, and particularly among our political leadership, we could get around. I'm not saying developers are good or bad; they just are. But they happen to build houses, and we need a lot more houses. Which brings me to the question of rent stabilization that came up earlier. Um, I understand it, particularly in the wake of COVID. It's a complicated topic. I thought that in general the county did an okay job of sort of splitting the middle on that one, but we do need to watch this very, very closely, and I do hope that it is reviewed annually because we know in other locations what these sorts of rent stabilizations and controls can do is kind of convert homeownership into kind of a lottery system rather than a more fair system that everyone can participate in. And I wanted to do, just while we're talking about the general commercial environment here, I wanted to do a short segue into homelessness here because all of the country, of course, we're seeing more, but it is obviously an achingly sad situation at a personal and a community level. I will also say that um, homelessness can also erode the commercial possibilities in a neighborhood. When there's a lot of it, people do tend to then stay away, don't always feel comfortable being around. And so that doesn't mean that we should vilify the person um, who is unhoused. What it does mean is we do need to take a more serious look at the roots of this. And people who study homelessness for a living have been shouting from the rooftops for the last 10 years that the number one predictor of homelessness, the number one predictor is the cost of housing. It's not even the poverty level because it's really the cost of housing relative to income, right? So we actually can have higher levels of homelessness in Montgomery County than other places simply because of the gap between house prices and income. And so we should all wish to combat this issue of homelessness. We know that housing supply is the number one lever we can pull. And we should all do that for moral and ethical reasons. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this also has implications on what's already a somewhat stressed out commercial and retail sector in this county. So the last thing I wanted to touch on briefly was just the whole budget situation. I thought that Dan did an excellent job of describing the issue in front of us, which is that we have come to expect a high level of services in this county. My business peers are detecting a little bit of an erosion in the last 8 years or so. I think some of this is because of maybe something of a vacuum of executive leadership, but something also is around the fact that our revenues aren't always keeping up with our ambitions, and the only way to do that is to grow the pie. And in particular, I think we know that from a county services perspective, having more dense neighborhoods with more young people is a very cost-effective way to grow our tax base because they tend to consume less services. And so, I think that this is for those of you who care about our fiscal health, we really ought to think clearly about this. What some people say is, well, we can just always raise taxes. And I think the reality is that we've seen from across multiple council sessions now is there's no political appetite in this county to raise tax levels. And so if I could summarize, I would say that we've done a good job of providing income in this county, providing revenue in this county to create more affordable housing, but it is always going to be something of a large band-aid on what's a much bigger problem, and it can only be solved with the private sector, and the private sector should be allowed to build what people want and need, which is a greater variety of housing in a greater variety of neighborhoods around the county. And I do hope we can get there, but mostly I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here and to help entertain any questions that you all have.
Thank you so much, Tony. We are a few minutes ahead of schedule, so before I turn it over to my teammate Linda Taylor for the Q&A, I'm just gonna see if Council President Fanny Gonzalez or Dan Reed have any other additional comments you'd like to make based on what you've heard here tonight, and then we'll turn it over to the Q&A.
I would just jump in and say it's been great to share this opportunity with both Tony and Dan. We're aligned. I was at an event the other day, and I was with a county executive. On his side, he was talking about increasing, the need of increasing more taxes. And on my side, I was, let's expand the tax base, say yes to more housing, yes to more jobs, especially in the private sector. In Montgomery County, we have been so passive because we are fortunate to have all these different federal agencies, and we have all these different, so many thousands of federal workers. And now that we're dealing with this crisis, it's like people finally are waking up and say, we cannot just depend on the federal government. We need to continue investing on the private sector and understanding that right now, and this is something that Dan touched, young families are leaving Montgomery County. That's a fact. Why? Because young families cannot afford housing and they cannot afford childcare. I have 2 children. You know how much I was paying for my 2 children in childcare? Almost $3,000 a month for childcare. Okay, that's a mortgage for a lot of people. So understanding that families are having a hard time to raise their kids and live here, I think if people understand that we're looking for solutions, and saying no to everything is not a solution. Saying that I want to protect my neighborhood character, what does that even mean? What does neighborhood character mean? What I want in my neighborhood is to feel safe and to feel welcome and to be able to go and buy an ice cream nearby, that to be able to go to a library, to go to a store and feel safe. That's what the character should be about, not about how a house looks like today. So we need to evolve as a society, and we need to do it together, understanding that when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about sector plans, right? It's about how are we planning for the future? How is not Gonzalez planning to your children? Because I want them to live in this county once they graduate from college. They're really young right now. But that's just my point, to make sure that at the end of the day, we need to humanize this issue and try to tell people that it's not just about you, but about society as a whole.
Great. Dan, would you like to add anything before we turn it over to the Q&A?
Everything that Council President Fanny Gonzalez and Tony say are right, and I'm seeing the Q&A pop up, and I am excited to answer them.
Yeah, all right. Then I'm going to turn it over to my Trending Topics teammate, Linda Taylor, who's going to take it from here with question and answers. It's up to you, Linda. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. And we have quite a few questions, so it's quite exciting. We'll try and answer as many different questions as possible, remembering that the program is scheduled to end at 8:30. So first question, and I'll start with Council President Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, and everybody, all speakers can then add their responses. We're just starting at a place. So with the permitting change that allowed duplexes and triplexes, how many of these types of houses have actually come online, and where are they?
So people are going to start building now as we speak. Okay, they actually were allowed to do them by the end of November. So it just started. So let's wait and see. This is a process. Please don't expect to have 1,000, 2,000 homes within the next month, because that's not what it is. It's a gradual change. And at the end of the day, the way I see this is creating opportunity for a homeowner to decide, do I want to have a Mac mansion? If I want to redevelop my property, you're still allowed to do that. Or do I want to create opportunity for perhaps my child to live next door, or my niece, or my brother. That's what we're talking about here. But we're just starting the process as we speak. And we're going to be evaluating the duplexes and triplexes every single year. Same thing with the rent stabilization bill. We evaluate it every single year, once a year. So.
Okay. Tony or Dan, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that makes sense.
All right then. Another question came. County homes sold as teardowns often sell for 600 to 800K. When land is so expensive, how can the cost of a new finished house be affordable?
Happy to take that one.
Okay, yeah, please.
So one thing I like to remind folks is that everyone has their own definition of affordable, right? There are official definitions, which we've sort of hinted at, which is subsidized, income restricted housing, right? I like to call that like big A affordable, but that is a very specific subset, and I think many people don't think of that immediately when it comes to mind. There's also what people can afford with different incomes. $600,000 and $800,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But when we're talking about households making between $100,000 and $200,000 a year, that is the kind of housing that they are looking at right now. Particularly the lower end, may be a stretch, but it is when you picture a sort of starter home in Montgomery County, that is what it costs now. So that is, in a very literal sense, what people can afford. We actually need more $600,000 and $800,000 homes because most new housing in Montgomery County is significantly more than that. I showed the picture of the home around the corner from me selling for $1.5 million. That is what a new single-family house costs inside the Beltway. It's even more in Bethesda or Chevy Chase. It's a little less if you go further out. But especially if you have not been in the housing market recently, 600 may seem off, but that is generally what we're talking about in terms of middle income housing. And last thing I'll say, I use the example of the apartment building. Even in that building, right? The cost to construct those units was an average of $561,000 a unit. It costs the same to build regardless of who it's intended for, and the only difference is that building has significant public funding that is meant to make up the difference between what it costs to build and what the people who are intended to live there can afford.
All right, thank you. Tony, a question specifically for you. What would you have the county council do? What would you ask of the county council do to increase the middle income housing stock?
Yeah.
Taking notes, Tony.
Thank you. So I think there's two things that I wish we had done again 25 years ago. One is that we should allow all kinds of housing types in every neighborhood in this county. My wife and I both grew up in neighborhoods where there were 8-unit apartment buildings, townhouses, single-family houses, sometimes larger apartment buildings, all mixed in together that allowed for a lot of different people and a lot of different income types. And those buildings were at different ages as well, which meant that there were different price points for people to live there. When we came to Montgomery County, it was so strange. We were like, where is this? And it doesn't exist. And the reason for that, it's worth bearing again, is because of the history of this county, that we didn't want Black and brown people, to some extent Jews and Armenians and others, living in certain neighborhoods. So they ginned up this concept of single family zoning. So the history of this is unusually ugly. But let's talk about today. Today, there's two things. One is to allow for all kinds of different, more flexible types that are going to naturally come in at different price points. Because if you build a McMansion versus a fourplex, the fourplex, by definition, those 4 units are going to cost less than the McMansion. The second thing is that we should allow more housing to be built just in general, everywhere. This includes more space for large apartment buildings. Because what happens over time is that the first thing that immediately happens is that other older apartment buildings become less expensive. Typically what happens is you have this cycle that we have seen, and developers can talk your ear off about this, where older buildings become less pricey as newer buildings get built. And so this is historically how this phenomenon, by the way, has been going on for millennia. And this is historically how cities naturally generated a diverse set of housing. What we did was gum up the whole process by saying we're going to dramatically reduce the possibility for supply. And so what that does is it ends up driving up and sustaining high costs among either what would be considered lower tier housing. And so what I noticed, this is the last thing, and I notice even in some of the questions that people say, well, what if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, what would happen if we don't do these reforms? What's going to happen is that poor people are going to be pushed out of this county. Houses that they can get by in now are they're not going to be able to get by in later. And this we know this is true because this has been going on for 25 years. So what I might say might sound radical, although I think it's a very healthy way for a community to expand. But if it sounds radical for you, it's because the situation is actually quite dire.
Okay. Okay, Dan, council member Natalie Flanagan Gonzalez. I'm really struggling with the name there.
Just call me
Sorry.
Natalie. Just
Oh,
Natalie.
okay. Thank you. Because
Hey.
otherwise I'm going to keep doing this. Do you want to add anything to what Tony said?
No, I think he said it so well. I would just add something that Tony mentioned in the previous comment when he talked about developers. And I think he nailed it because I have said this actually publicly. I'm not afraid to. People have this idea that it's okay to demonize developers as is they're bad and you're good. And just when you start off with that conversation, making it seem like either you're this or that, you're starting off wrong because we're here to brainstorm and find a solution, not a perfect solution because there's no such thing, but it's we need to start with the idea and thinking that we all need each other. I need developers, I need landscapers, I need architects, I need everybody. And I need the people who are gonna buy those properties and move in to work together without demonizing each other. Because when you do that, you are creating you're using this issue that is so important and you're making it more complicated and more toxic for people to talk about, and it's wrong. So I feel like I had to say that when Tony said that, and I'm backing you up, Tony. So
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions here about zoning, right? And the question is, what zoning changes are still needed to build more multifamily homes, triplexes, duplexes? How is that going to be addressed? What's out there that we're doing to try and address it? And then how can we make sure when duplexes are built, triplexes are built, that they are affordable or have enough variety in pricing to ensure it's not luxury?
can I say something very quickly and then you jump in? Whoever asked that question, please check out the University Boulevard Corridor Plan that we just
Yeah.
approved. How painful that was. I'm a member of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee as well, not just a council member. And I went through all the work sessions. And just please watch it and see how difficult it was to get colleagues to expand the area to allow more housing. And at the end, we reached a compromise that was not even 100% voted for all council members. Okay, 3 people voted no, and we're 11. Do the math. Actually, one person was already at that point in the last session. Gabe Albornoz had resigned, so we were only 10 council members. 3 voted against, 7 for it. And just see how painful that process was. So you can answer the question. And I will personally continue working on sector plans and pushing for more housing and zoning changes because it's the right thing to do. I'll leave it there.
Dan, Tony?
I would really I would encourage folks to interrogate what do you mean by affordable, because there are many different definitions. And also remember that the county cannot tell developers how much a house should cost, right? A house costs what it costs to build because of construction costs, labor costs, tariffs certainly aren't helping. Land costs, which are high here because the land is valuable because people want to be here. Um, the thing the county can do is make the permitting process go faster because time is money. They can also reduce opportunities for opposition because that incurs legal costs and lawyers are very expensive. They can make it easier to build more homes on a piece of land so that high cost of land is spread across multiple homes. So the that is, I think, the key, right? More homes on a piece of land is the one tool that we can use to lower the cost of a house. Um, and then you have subsidies, which are the way that we get those prices down low enough that people who are very low income can afford them. Been a lot of conversations about rent stabilization since the county passed it 2 years ago. That's an important tool, but it's not a tool to keep housing prices low. It is a tool to make sure that renters can stay in their homes because the landlord can't jack up the rent by some exorbitant amount. I received a 30% rent increase in my last apartment 6 years ago, so I moved because you can't do that, right? That's not an affordable housing strategy. Subsidies are. Um, Increasing supply is also an important part of that. And last thing I'll say is like it really is about we need to open the aperture, the variety of different kinds of homes we can have. There was a question about townhomes, implying that they are just inaccessible for senior citizens. Some townhomes can have one floor. Some townhomes can have, the master bedroom, all the living areas on one floor, and the guest room is upstairs. There are retired people living in townhomes, and my next door neighbors, in fact, my neighbors across the street, in fact. Uh, so I would also encourage some open-mindedness there, right? That we need different kinds of housing for many different kinds of people. People have different needs, um, and that we shouldn't be so quick to write something off as being bad or exclusively good. It is about creating more choices.
Bernie, do you want to
Yeah.
add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I wanted to just riff on this word luxury because it often comes up a lot. It's sort of like luxury housing with greedy developers. And so I think we ought to let's chat about that for a minute because I would submit to you that what in a real estate context, what luxury is kind of a stand-in for new, right? So if you have modernized your kitchen in the last 5 years and you decide to sell your house, your realtor is going to describe it as a luxury kitchen because it's new. And so all housing typically is going to have more modern appurtenances and that sort of thing. Some is going to cost more, some is going to cost less. But it's always been a certain sort of irony to me is that here we are, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, and we're trying to avoid building luxury housing. It's interesting in community meetings. I talked about this legacy of trying to keep poor people out of our neighborhood. There's a sense like that we should also keep wealthy people out of our neighborhood here in the county that puzzles me a little bit. Sometimes it's the same person who says that both. And it's almost like we have this vision of this like magical middle class person who's going to be just at our level. Um, and that's the only kind of person that we want in our neighborhood. So first of all, I hope we can all reject that as a mission as being unfair in so many ways, but we should be, as the District of Columbia and Northern Virginia are definitely doing, trying to attract some luxury homeowners, particularly in high density areas, because this is the most efficient way that we'll be able to keep the kind of county services that we want. If you don't have, I don't know what other answer there is to actually being able to have the excellent schools that we have, the great public services that we have, all of the backlog in infrastructure work that needs to be done around water control and that sort of thing, without some degree of higher end as well as, of course, affordable housing. And again, there is definitely a rhythm and trend that goes back forever where things that are new often get older and cheaper, and a healthy community would be constantly adding a new set of stock over time rather than just saying no, 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 no. And with housing, we are the county that says no, and we have to start saying yes to to anybody who wants to live here and make our county, keep the county that we love.
Okay. Another question talks about subsidies, and how well we think, or from any of you again, what do you feel has been successful use of public funds, that we've got a good return either on housing or grants, or what subsidies do you think are working well right now for Montgomery County in the space of affordable housing?
I can just very quickly say we have an agency called the Housing Opportunities Commission, and they do an amazing job funding housing projects, and making sure that they leverage the money that we provide or give to them to ensure that they maximize as much as possible housing production. So that's one way. And many of the projects that they work on are projects that create deeply affordable housing or mixed use or mixed income housing too. And as Tony said, yes, we want to create opportunity for low income folks, but we definitely want to have those wealthy people come in and give them an opportunity, because when we talk about increasing or expanding the tax base, it means bringing people with money so they can pay taxes and help us afford to close the gap. We have so many needs in this county, so many in our schools, in our parks, in our food insecurity issues, and we cannot afford to say no to certain populations, and that includes the wealthy population. But the housing opportunities, the HOC as we call them, is key on how we can leverage public funding from the state and also the county to create more housing. So I'm just gonna keep it simple that way.
Yeah, I would second that. The Montgomery County's HOC has this thing called the Housing Production Fund, which the council created a couple of years ago, which has become a national best practice in creating affordable housing. There are folks from all over the nation who are coming to Montgomery County to see how it works. And it is, I'm bad at math, but so my very basic explanation of it is, I described there's the cost of what it takes to get something built, and there's the cost, the money that you need to basically pay down that price to get it to a price that lower income residents can afford. What the Housing Production Fund does is it creates a little pot of money from the county that goes into that, basically what's referred to as the capital stack. What then happens is the county also owns the land and takes ownership of the building when it is finished. A traditional developer builds it, runs the building, the county owns it. And basically the money they provide is a loan at a lower interest rate than most private banks would do. That does a couple of things. One, because the county owns the building and the county is charging a lower interest rate, they can offer lower rents, basically. But there's also, because of that interest, money goes back to the county, basically refilling the fund that can then go to provide other projects. The first project that has been built under this is in Shady Grove. It's called the Laureate. From the naked eye, you would look at this and you would think this is any quote unquote luxury apartment complex. It's got the swimming pool and the fire pits and the granite countertops. But this is housing for middle class and working class people. This is for teachers and childcare workers and nurses and firefighters, because of this innovative fund that the county has created. And the state passed a law last year that will enable other jurisdictions with their own public housing agencies to do the same thing. So that is one thing I will say we do fantastically well. It is not a universal solution, but it's a big part of the solution.
Oh, great. Tony, do you have anything to add? Okay. I'm going to read this question word for word because I'm not clear, so hopefully I'm getting to the point. So the question is, why are existing HOAs and condominiums not reconsidered or not considered a valuable source of affordable housing? They are not regulated like rental units in order to prevent ever increasing fees. HOA and condo boards and management push out homeowners, could be seniors, low-income families, young people, etc., who once bought an affordable unit but can no longer continue to pay these ever escalating monthly fees? So
I would say the condo association, that's a big topic. And actually they're regulated by the state, not the county. That's one thing. And I do know of properties where the actual unit, they may say it's affordable, but the condo fee is even more than $1,000. So imagine, you may be paying a mortgage of, $500, but then the $1,000 condo fee plus, and it increases. But that's regulated by the state. I know. I actually wanna look into this issue. It's on my list, but that's something that I had to work in conjunction with a state delegation. That's as far I can go right now. Yeah.
I think, first off, I thank you to former Delegate Gutierrez for making that question. But I think it speaks to another sort of crucial problem in the county is it's not that we just don't have enough housing, but it's also our housing stock is getting older, right? And so what you're seeing in many of these older condo complexes, which date to the 50s and 60s, is that, when a condo is built and everything is brand new, the condo fees, which are intended to cover all of the common areas and the structure and exterior of the building, are pretty low because everything is new and doesn't require a lot of maintenance. But over time, as the building gets older, as the complex gets older, these things get older, things wear out, they have to be replaced. And so fees go up, especially if that association hasn't established a reserve to pay, basically a rainy day fund. And that's a real challenge, for the homeowners who are, struggling to make their fees. But also for the condo associations, because those fees are needed to keep things running. And you don't want to get into a situation where buildings become unsafe, because that is a way that homeowners then lose their investment, right? So that's, to me, that is another argument in favor of we need to constantly be growing and renewing our housing stock so that people have additional choices.
Okay. Another question. So economists have long been concerned about property taxes that punish homeowners when they increase the value of their house. Is anyone looking at the structure of property taxes and the role they play in affordable housing?
Well, this one is a little bit of a bugaboo for me. I think it's not that the rates themselves go up, it's that the value of your house is going up and therefore your property taxes are higher. So I think that this is a fair and progressive model, right? If you're concerned about your high property taxes, then you might want to consider moving to a house with a lower value and then taking the profits there. But I'm being a little bit facetious there. I think I think that the county would be, I would hope that county members would be opposed to giving people with extremely valuable homes a price break on their taxes because their homes had escalated, particularly since our exclusionary zoning policy is part of what's driving this great increase. So, there are different ways that the mortgage market now is so sophisticated that there's different ways you can get reverse mortgages. The county rate is what, but somewhere depending on the situation between 1% to 2%. So if your house goes up in value 100,000, yeah, you're on the hook for another 1,000 plus in taxes. You can get, financing for that the payout is after you sell your house, and there's different ways around this. So I don't want to be a Grinch here, but it feels a little bit like somebody's complaining about the extra taxes they have to pay on an asset that's massively expanding in value. And I'm not sure that's the biggest issue for the county to address here, particularly given our fiscal stress.
Okay. Okay, a question about the master plan. That the master plan has approved locations for housing to be built, but it's not being built for some reason. Why is that?
I think they're talking about the pipeline, the development pipeline that now we changed the name. It's not called the pipeline anymore. It's called, what's it called now? The tracker, development tracker is called. Yeah, we switched the name like a month ago, by the way. Because when you say pipeline, people assume, well, it's already on the master plan. It got approved. You already have this series of site plans already approved. And people have these expectations that are going to get built. Some of those site plans that were approved that are on the previously called pipeline, now called development tracker, they were approved back in the 80s when I was born. And they're now moving forward for whatever reason. There's so many reasons why many of these projects don't move forward, including I know this particular project where it was owned by family, and then the family just stopped getting along. So they're not moving forward anymore. So all different types of reasons. So having a project being approved on a site plan by the planning board doesn't mean that they're going to get developed. Okay. So I think I answered the question.
Yeah. I think I'm learning so much, and I'm sure the audience is, because there's so much behind, right? So much behind these things.
Now that you say that, Linda, let me just give a pitch to something that we're working on. The planning department, thanks to funds that we gave them, the county council gave them, they have now something called the Planning Academy. So basically, you go through this training for several weeks. Don't ask me about the schedule, but I think it's on the weekends or the evenings. They have like different schedules, and they just finished the first class. And it's people who have no idea of what development, anything about development, and they join this class and they graduate. And I met with some of the graduates, and they were like, "Wow, I finally understand this county." So I encourage people who are thinking of creating or being active in their civic association, especially, to join the Planning Academy. And I think it's free for, you can just sign up, or there are scholarships. It's fun. And every single person that I have met that have done it is so grateful, because they got to learn how this county works in terms of development and in planning. So go to the planning department's website for more information, or just email me and I'll send it to you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, question about modular housing, which can be more affordable. Is there support for this? Is it being blocked by local developers? Are the county supporting modular housing? And can I get a definition of what is modular housing?
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions here. One is about modular housing, also I see manufactured housing. This is basically refers to homes that are assembled in a factory, usually in multiple pieces, and then they are assembled on site. It is true that this can be a much more cost-effective way to build, especially because since you are in a climate-controlled factory, you don't have to worry about the rain, you don't have to worry about delays. We just move a lot faster. The challenge is it can be difficult to scale. If you are a home builder and you have a property in the county, you may have a challenge sourcing the modular home builder to build the modules. Whereas your factory is a factory close by. If you can't get a factory close by, you just go back to the traditional method of just building it on site. Zoning is no longer an obstacle, thankfully. There was a law passed in 2024, part of Governor Moore's big housing package in 24, now legalizes manufactured or modular homes all across Maryland in single-family zones. The finished product of a modular home just looks like any other house. You probably have one in your neighborhood, you don't even know. So the state actually just took away a big barrier. The challenge is now a little more of the actual, how do you actually get them built? Who's building them? Where are the factories? How easy is it to get them to the site? And then how do you scale it up to actually turn that into a subdivision or a development? So it's another important part of the solution.
And can I say something very quickly? And mention Governor Westmore. I gotta say, that man, although not perfect, because none of us are perfect, he has been outstanding talking about housing without being afraid. And I expect for him to do more, Westmore to do more. But I just wanted to give him a shout out because he has been pretty awesome.
Tony, did you want to say thank you, Natalie? Tony, did you want to share? I think there was something you're trying to put in the chat.
I'm just wondering if the person who made that comment was thinking a little bit of what we think of as mobile homes and whether you wanted to comment on that, Dan.
Yeah, so there's the term manufactured housing, which is related. That is, we historically refer to them as mobile homes or trailer parks. They are also homes built in a factory, but due to a quirk of federal regulations, they have to be built with the chassis underneath, so you could like put them on a trailer, even though they are usually just brought to the site and then put in place. Also part of the solution, it is a federal issue to change the building code so they don't have to have the chassis on it. But manufactured housing communities and or trailer parks are a crucial source of affordable housing in Montgomery County. There used to be a number of mobile home parks in the county that gave is a very important option for folks starting out. There are many fewer now, in part because land is valuable and you can build more apartments on that property and house more people, particularly less affluent people. But there are still opportunities to build more modular housing in the county. But the issue is less zoning and more on the actual how do you get it built side, and the federal government too.
Okay. Another question is about the percentage of single family homes. Do we know what the percentage is? Is it not so much that we want to, and what's the percentage we want to get to? You talked, Dan, in fact, you all have talked about variety, right? Variety. Is there a thought about what the mix could be, should be?
Natalie, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. I know it's less than half of the homes in the county are single family homes, but I don't know exactly how much.
Man, I think it's more than half. Way more than half.
It is. I
It's
do know
single family home.
like detached single family
Yeah.
home. But
Yeah.
I think of it less as an ideal percentage and more, are we providing homes that meet the needs of the people who need homes, right? And that can mean many things. It can mean size, it can mean location, it can mean maintenance, whether you have a large yard or whether you don't have a large yard to maintain. It can mean something as simple as like, a lot of the older homes in the county don't have closets or big closets because people don't have as much stuff. So, giving people the chance to have homes that have modern closets and modern appliances and modern fire safety measures like sprinklers and firewalls. And so the more we make it easier to build housing, the more we can have the variety of homes that we need to meet the many diverse needs of a diverse county.
And I think we're maybe coming up to our final question and maybe then closing remarks if you each want to share a few. And the closing question, how are we doing on ADUs and home sharing?
I just wanted to say very quickly that family detached homes made up 48% of Montgomery County's housing stock. It's 48%. Just wanted to make.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's about 90% of the residential lane area. So you know that. Your question was on what was it again?
ADUs, how are we doing on
yeah.
ADUs and home sharing?
Home share. We have both in the county. I was actually on the planning board when we approved ADUs. It was probably the first time I was traumatized about housing issues because we got so many issues, so many people coming to oppose ADUs and making the statement that ADUs are gonna take over the entire county and we're gonna create all this traffic. And so far, man, how many ADUs have we created for the past, 10 years since we have them? Very, very few. Very, very, very few. I think at the end of the day, I think in home sharing, we have those. We have nonprofits, including Habitat for Humanity and quite a few folks who match people with other folks so they can share a home, so they can have roommates. That also happens. At the end of the day, what we want in Montgomery County is to have opportunities for everybody, opportunities to create a duplex or triplex on your property if you choose to do so. Nobody's obligating you to do that, but having the opportunity to build an ADU if that's what you want. That's the conversation I want to keep having. Not about percentage or not about how many of apartments should we have in the county. No, how can we create more opportunities for people to build more, and especially in strategic places, meaning near transit, for example.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes, and it's really been a great, like I say, discussion and learning. I don't know if either of you want to, or if the three of you want to take a few minutes to just wrap up your takeaways for us. Tony?
Sure. I started out talking about how this is an older issue. I think we have, unfortunately, and maybe inadvertently, dug ourselves into a really deep hole in this county. And some of the things that I've suggested and have come up here around significant changes to our zoning might seem really radical, but when you look at, there are many, many other suburban counties, many, many other cities that have really, really jumped ahead of us on this. I'm used to Montgomery County being a kind of an innovator, and as Dan mentioned, we are in certain areas, but we need to catch up to the rest of the country, I think, here when it comes to allowing greater variety of housing types, not just in some neighborhoods, but really in all neighborhoods. It may seem radical, but really, if you compare us to other places that are really thriving, it's not radical at all. And I really hope that the county council and our next county executive can get there.
Dan?
I want to echo what Tony said. There is we have so much potential here, and part of the potential of this county is to give people a chance to build lives here, and for folks who grew up here, as I did, and as my brother did, to be able to stay here and build their lives. My brother actually moved to Howard County last year because could not find home he could afford here, and also he works there. But I would invite y'all to visit our website, www.ggwash.org. We have content every day. You can find opportunities to get more involved in your community, find out what's happening in the county, particularly as it relates to housing and land use and transportation issues. But also, I started doing a couple of years ago walking tours in my neighborhood of East Silver Spring, where we have a very diverse mix of housing types. On my block alone, I live in a townhouse. There's single family homes across the street. There's a 6-story apartment building sort of catty-corner to me behind. There are fourplexes, and it is a very diverse neighborhood in many, many different dimensions. I've been doing walking tours. We'll do one when it is warm, so keep an eye out for that in the spring. I love to show people my neighborhood. I love to show people what a diverse neighborhood of different housing types looks like. And I do think it suggests a path forward for the rest of the county. So, yeah. Thank you for having me.
And
Natalie?
yeah, I will say I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County for hosting us today. I really appreciate having this conversation. We need to talk more about housing so people can engage in the conversation and understand that, like I said before, we shouldn't demonize the issue. We need to address the issue. And the only way to address the issue is when we talk to each other and find common ground, understanding that you're not going to get your way or the highway, but we got to do something. And that's all I wanted to say. And I'm grateful to all of you for being part of Montgomery County.
Linda,
Thank you.
before I turn it over to you to close, I just wanted to direct people to the chat. Tony has put a link to a video on related housing issues from a Falls Church Council member in the chat, and Dan has also put in a link to a map where you can see where all the ADUs have been built. So I just wanted to make sure people would click on the chat before the program ends and make sure if they're interested in that they can capture those links before we close. And I'll turn it back over to you, Linda. Thank you.
Okay. So that's everything for tonight. Let's come to the end of this session. And I want to thank our presenters, our esteemed presenters, And thank you for joining us, those who have watched this, and for your questions. If you've enjoyed this free program, want to learn more about the League of Women Voters work in Montgomery County, you can find out more about us, including how to support our efforts at LWVMOCOMD.org. With that, we would like to say thank you again and good night.